Hey guys, I don't know if you knew this, but making a webtoon is hard. Doggy will spend like months writing out every little detail, making a bunch of character sheets with every single angle known to man, and then you'll go ahead and post it feeling kinda good, and it gets read in less than 2 minutes. Now, I don't know why you would bear through that, but if you're like me, webcomics is that bolder and we are imagining ourselves happy. Making up silly little guys in your head is the best form of escapism, and you want to give them the proper story to go frolic in. Anyway, if you didn't know already, my name is Space, and I created and have been posting Blooming Season on Webtoons for 5 years. It's been a pretty long journey since then, and I feel proud of what I made so far, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't full of problems, like a lot of them. So let me take you all on this journey to figure out where I went wrong and what I'm doing now to fix my story for the upcoming reboot, and maybe learn something too. So my first tip is take the time to really know your characters. My favorite stories have always been character driven, and I feel like those tend to have the most relatability and insight. Blooming Season of course followed suit, but ironically my biggest fault was not understanding the characters I was working so hard to write for. When writing a character, you should know everything that makes them tick. There are tons of lists online, like those 100 questions to ask your OC, and personality quizzes that I think are pretty helpful for starting off. But when you're creating an OC, it's kind of just a long series of asking yourself questions about what so-and-so would do and how they would react to it. And I know everybody wants to be super unique, but don't be afraid to follow archetypes if you think it makes sense. If you like how Gojo from JJK has white hair and you're like, oh, I also want my OC to be a hot, white-haired baddie and insanely overpowered, then go for it, who cares? But also following an archetype can be a pretty good backbone for starting off. For example, I'd say my main character Ren is your standard goofy protagonist. He's really sweet, but sometimes really careless, kinda like Usagi from Sailor Moon, and his earnesty reminds me a lot of Tanjiro from Demon Slayer. With some extra details and a bunch of trauma, I guess. Bam, he's a character unique to me and my story. Everything's a little inspired from something else, so don't feel scared to add in what you like. It's kind of like making your own art style. Everything you're a fan of just gets jumbled together to make your own taste, and that becomes you. Next up, another thing that can really help with character writing is knowing how everyone interacts with each other. So what exactly does this mean? Write how each character sees each other. Is character A really jealous of B's soft demeanor because they're self-conscious of their own loudness? How do they meet? Maybe A and B have the same order at their local coffee shop and they found it funny. You can do whatever you want. Now, some of you might be like, yeah, this is basic character writing, of course I'm going to do that. But me, on the other hand, I'm dumb, and I didn't realize that you can't just be doing this with your main characters. You have to do this with everyone. A to B, A to C, C to D, you get the point. That's when it all comes together. Now for characters whose relationships matter a lot, like romantic interest or rivals, it helps to break things down even further. Personally, I focus on these things. Contrasts, admirations, opinions of each other, what they gain from each other, you get the point. The last one is especially important for moving the plot forward. Characters need incentive to interact with each other. You could have two OCs perfectly planned out, but if they have no reason to like each other or be near each other, your story would just end up dry and you might feel lost when you go to write stuff. The next tip I say is that you can never have too much structure. Now this might be something maybe a lot of you can relate to. You get really excited thinking of this cool story, you have a vague idea of the plot and the beginning is set, and you just want to post it already. You think to yourself, oh, I'll just figure it out when I get to it. But then you get to it, and then you realize you'll be tripping all over the plot holes before you even made it to the end of the story. So I cannot implore you enough when I say, have foresight. When I started writing, I usually draft out dialogue and script before doing the actual comic draft. Before, this was pretty much all the planning I did before I started drawing things out. I just let all the small details sit in my brain, but that's pretty bad. You should be writing everything out, even if it's something small, you'll most likely forget it. If you're writing a fantasy story, know the rules of your world. What's the government like? Does it experience all the seasons? Things like that. There are a lot of different structures to follow, so what I do won't necessarily work for you. But you'll definitely feel the difference between the story where the author knows exactly what urban planning their high school drama's town has, and an author whose characters are constantly standing in the generic school void. The point is, everything influences each other, and when you realize that, you gain a lot of power as an author. Next, force yourself to make more than you need. This ties into the last idea. I was super lazy, or rather too impulsive, where I felt a need to get things out just because I was finished with it, but this is not the best habit. A lot of people have 2 or 3 episodes on standby so they can rely on it in case something happens. Having that breathing room definitely helps eliminate some stress when the webtoon process can be so demanding. Next, talk to your friends. I'm really grateful that I have 2 older sisters who I can bug whenever, especially my middle sister, who has a hobby for writing, so she knows exactly what I'm going through. It's just so worth it to have someone to bounce ideas off of, just to get out of your head. You really start to run in circles when you think things over too much by yourself. I know it might be scary to share these things with your friends and family, especially if you think they don't have the same interests, but I promise you that doesn't matter. Several of my friends have told me they would never read my comic if they weren't my friends. It has nothing to do with them not liking it, they just don't read webtoons. Also, it's just so fun to get carried away by crazy ideas that you and your friends come up with, and sometimes it ends up being included. When I can't rely on my friends or sisters, I often turn to online forums or servers where they can offer writing advice. The Webtoon Canvas server is a great resource to use, which offers a lot of chances to talk about writing and art advice with other creators. Next tip, be okay with things not being great. You need to get over yourself and stop being a perfectionist. At least that's what I would tell myself. Everyone's so scared to start. Starting means you're stepping out of your comfort zone, showing your art to the world, and showing your story. It's like showing some of the deepest parts of yourself for anyone to see, and that's really scary. But at the same time, if you get so hell-bent on how you're being perceived, it starts to get really suffocating, and you stop moving forward altogether. Creating is taking a risk, and you have to be okay with that. When I first made my comic, I told myself I didn't care if it sucked. It just mattered that I got it out to begin with. Most of the time, it was pretty hard to keep up this act, but I had to accept that everything was just a learning experience. As a creator, sometimes it really feels like nothing I made mattered unless it was good. But such absolute thinking isn't realistic at all. Practice is literally everything, and I would be nothing without it. It's the same for comics, and it's the same for art. Yeah, sure, some people are starting at faster paces or more naturally intuitive, but it's like that one picture with the 2 cakes. They're gonna be happy to have 2 rather than 1. And those are my tips. Yeah, towards the end this really started to turn into like a pep talk, and it's a little cheesy, I don't know. I feel like sometimes I sound like a Disney Channel star, but that's just how it is. Writing is hard, everything's so hard, but you have to keep going, right? Sorry there aren't too many technical details like what canvas size I use and all that, but you can probably find a ton of those videos already on YouTube, so go search it up. Or if you want from me, put it in the comments. Yeah, thank you so much for all the support, especially on my first video. I'm blown away, and please continue to support me in the future, even though I'm recording this on a terrible mic, and yeah. Follow me on Instagram, subscribe to my Patreon, yay, bye.